Kala Pani, the bloody saga of Andaman jail. Narrative in historical style. What days those were, when the sun rose over the land of India, spreading not the rays of freedom but the shadows of slavery. That was an era when Indians were not called human beings, but subjects, and the law of the British Raj was considered stricter than the command of God. The British government, in its arrogance of power, had concluded that whoever refused to bow their head was unworthy of living. Thus, a punishment was invented, the mere mention of which would make people's hair stand on end. Kala Pani. They say there is an island in the Sea of Andaman, blue water all around. But in its midst stands a building, where once there was no laughter, no hope, no life. This was the cellular jail, that prison, where the warriors of India were, confined not only physically, but spiritually. Each prisoner had a separate cell, such silence between the walls, that even the sound of one's own breath felt like a sin. Here, no prisoner could hear another's voice. The British severed human from human, and pushed them into a solitude where even consciousness became an enemy. After the War of Independence of 1857, thousands of freedom fighters were arrested for the crime of rebellion. Some were shot dead, some were hanged, and the unfortunate ones who remained were sent to Andaman's Kala Pani. It is said that this punishment was worse than death. As the sun set, the clanking of chains could be heard. At dawn, prisoners were forced to extract oil with iron presses. In the heat, in hunger, barefoot, drenched in sweat. And if anyone stopped from exhaustion, then lashes would rain down, flesh would tear, but voices were suppressed. The British soldiers laughed, and the prisoners did not cry, they just remained silent. Silence sometimes is more dangerous than rebellion. It was this silence that gave birth to a new generation, one that knew how to fight not with bullets but against tyranny. Among these prisoners were some whom we today call heroes of freedom, Veer Savarkar, Batukeshwar Dut, and all those names that were buried within those walls. They say Savarkar wrote with his nails on those very walls, "We have not lost, we are only imprisoned." Kala Pani was not just a punishment. It was a psychological vice, aimed at making the prisoner feel that he was no longer a human, merely a body over which the will of the British law prevailed. For the British officials, this was a laboratory, where humanity was tested, faith was crushed, and courage was shackled in chains. Time passed. Some prisoners died, some went mad, and some died even while living. But one thing never died: the desire for freedom. Within the dark walls of that jail, that desire kept breathing. And ultimately that very desire reached every city, every lane, every heart of the subcontinent. This was the spark that ignited the fire of freedom in 1947. When India became independent, this jail in Andaman stood silent, as if centuries of secrets were buried in the chest of an elder. Now there is a museum there, people come, take pictures. But very few know that screams still echo in those walls. These are the screams of those freedom fighters who had the courage to speak the truth and paid the price with their lives. Kala Pani was not just a jail. It was a symbol of British cruelty, and also the foundation of Indian resistance. This story reminds us that freedom is never obtained as charity. For it, sacrifices have to be made. Blood has to be shed, and names have to be carved on the wall of faith.